It's Ash from SuperVideos back for another video for The Last of Us on HBO, another review for an episode of The Last of Us. This is my review for Season 1, Episode 4, which was called Please Hold My Hand. So stay tuned, we'll be right back with my review of this episode. Alright, as always, before we dive into it, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. With that, let's jump right into it. So first things first, opening minutes, I thought was a pretty interesting way to open. I did like the way that they portrayed Ellie as someone who is curious and someone who is really trying to get her hands dirty in a way and start using that gun. So I think that this was pretty interesting and sort of nice setup for what we're eventually going to see for her character development. Although I did think that this particular scene was stretched out a little bit. I feel like they could have shortened it, but overall, I did like the concept of what they were going for with showing Ellie using the gun in front of the mirror, or at least looking at herself with a gun in front of a mirror. Next, let's talk about the highlight of the first half of the episode, which had everything to do with the development of both Joel and Ellie's characters, and it was supposed to really be about them bonding together. Like, the first half of this episode was really just to show us that Joel and Ellie are bonding. I liked everything that they did when it comes to Ellie telling stupid jokes, telling dad jokes. I thought those were funny, and I think that it definitely worked. More fun and exciting than seeing, or not seeing, but hearing the stupid jokes that Ellie was telling was seeing Joel's reaction to those jokes that Ellie was telling. So very entertaining. Obviously, it's exactly like the video game, and because of that, it definitely fit. But at the same time, as great as it was, it worked better in the video game than the show. Although first time viewing it, I thought that it worked really well. But watching it the second time, you kind of do see that it's not quite as smooth. Like in the video game, the interaction between Joel and Ellie is very natural, is very smooth. But it's not quite as natural in the TV adaptation. And maybe that's on purpose. Maybe the reason for that is because they want to show us that the bond between Joel and Ellie is still not where it was in the game. Like they're gonna stretch that a little bit or something along those lines. So that's a possibility. But just comparing it to the game, I feel like the game did it a little bit better. But obviously, maybe they're gonna stretch that story out for a little bit more until we kind of see the full natural transition of Joel and Ellie just being strangers to them being sort of like family. Speaking of the jokes, I absolutely enjoyed the scene with the coffee as well. I thought that was funny, and I think that that was something that made more sense in a way because it felt more natural. Like it was smoother because it was basically part of their routine thing. It wasn't something that they just added in, like Ellie telling jokes, you know what I mean? Like it felt like this was more genuine and natural in terms of their interaction than the other one. Speaking of their interaction, I also really enjoyed the magazine scene. Obviously, this was ripped straight from the video game source material. I thought that it was great, and I definitely enjoyed it. Not as much as the video game, but I did enjoy it, and I thought that it was a pretty solid comedic scene that showed what type of character Ellie is, and I really enjoyed it. Now, the only reason I enjoyed the video game more is probably because I saw that first. If I saw this first, I would have loved this more than the other. It's just a matter of which one I saw first, but they were both equally as entertaining and fun. Now, the only comment that I forgot to make about the magazine scene is that I also really loved the insertion of the cassette tape dialogue and using the same music just like the game. By the way, that was the same music that they used for the trailer, but I loved all of that and I thought that it was great and it just worked pretty nicely in the TV adaptation. The other thing I want to mention is when it comes to a conversation that Joel and Ellie had about Tommy and Tess, I thought that that was pretty well done. Obviously, there were two different times, once when they were in the car and once when they were in the stairwells, but both of those were pretty much connected. They both told us a little bit more about what happened to Tommy and Tess in that 20-year time jump. So I thought that was great and it definitely worked. I would have loved to actually see some stories which they were telling in dialogue. Instead of hearing it in dialogue, I would have loved to actually see it, but they didn't do that, maybe for time. I don't know, but I think that it would have been nice to see, but just hearing it was also good because it filled some of the gaps that were there. When it comes to the story with Joel and Ellie in Kansas City, I did really like one aspect of things at the beginning, which was how they incorporated the Fedra base being abandoned into the story. I thought that that was great. They didn't really do that in the video game, so I really liked the fact that they did that because it makes more sense and it kind of fills in the gaps again. Now, when it comes to the truck ambush scene, I really, really liked it. I liked it better in the video game. The reason for that is because even though this was great at the beginning, when it first happens, there were a few pieces that were missing, which I thought were important. One, the dialogue with Joel saying he ain't even hurt. I thought that that was sort of needed. I know it's small, but it was a pretty awesome dialogue in the scene in that particular moment, which we didn't really get in the TV adaptation. So that was a missed opportunity. The other thing is Joel actually hits the first guy but tries to not hit the second guy and then runs into the building. So I thought that was clunky because why not just hit both of them? You know what I mean? So I didn't really like that part because it felt kind of stupid. You know what I mean? The other aspect of it is the way that they fixed that problem in the video game is that instead of Joel not hitting the second guy, they actually had a bus ram into the truck, which caused the crash. So they could have done the same thing. Not sure why they changed that. That would have made more sense. But anyway, then we see obviously the crash. The other thing that I didn't really like is how short the fight with the Hunters gang was in this particular moment. Because in the game, it was a much bigger deal. It was a much bigger thing. But in the TV adaptation, they kind of rushed over it and they reduced like 95% of the gunfight that we actually saw. So that was a little disappointing, but I did like the fact that they had Ellie come in with her gun to save Joel. In the video game, the moment where Joel is saved by Ellie happens in a different time, but they didn't do that, or I don't think they're going to do that. They did it earlier. Now, one thing that I think will be disappointing is that if they completely ignore that or skip over that. If you remember in the game when that happened, it was not just great storyline wise, like it helped in the story, but also visually. It was pretty nice visually with the gun in the water and all of that, if you remember. So the fact that they might not do that is a little disappointing, unless they do it, but they do it slightly differently. But I did like this specific moment with Ellie saving Joel, and I did like the fact that they expanded the story a little bit. Instead of just having Ellie kill the guy, they expanded that. I really liked the way they did that. And I loved the fact that they had Joel tell Ellie to go away. And then we actually heard the screams and all of that with Joel executing the guy instead of us actually seeing it. Because I thought that it was more impactful. We were seeing things through Ellie's perspective or her eyes. So I thought that that worked great. However, something else that didn't work really well is there was one moment where there is a guy on the other side of the wall and Joel kills the guy, but it happens so fast it feels clunky. Like I missed it. Like I didn't really understand what was going on until a few seconds after. That could have been done a little better, and I think the reason why they did that is they didn't want to show the kill. Other than that, why would they just not show it? You know what I mean? So that was a little clunky. We did see just like 2 seconds of the guy, 2 seconds of Joel killing the guy, and 2 seconds of Ellie's reaction. That was it, which could have been like a couple seconds or even a minute long to really give it the impact that it should have had, because it was much quicker than it should have been. Now let's talk about the hunters. I absolutely loved the introduction of the hunters, the expansion of the hunters story. I loved everything about them. Obviously, in the game, their story wasn't really delved into, and we didn't really get to know them. But in the show, they did really expand their story, and I loved what they have done with their story. One aspect of things, obviously, they have a leader, Kathleen, so that makes things really interesting, and I absolutely loved the way that they introduced this character and they showed us who this character was and everything about why she's interested in finding who she's looking for. So I thought all of that was great. As far as her right hand man here, Perry, for those of you that missed it, he's actually played by Jeffrey Pierce, who voiced Tommy in the game. So that was a tidbit of information that you might have missed that I thought was great. But I think that Perry is going to potentially become a bigger part of the story in the next episode. But with that said, I'm disappointed that they didn't really expand on his story in this episode, because there were a few moments where they could have really done something interesting or cool with him, but they didn't really. He didn't have much dialogue. He was just in the background, even though being a right hand man of the leader of the hunters, I feel like he should have got a bit more story. But with that said, I loved name dropping Henry as a Easter egg in a way. Well, it wasn't really an Easter egg, it was just teasing at Henry, who obviously appeared in the game, but they didn't really make it obvious that it was the same Henry. But obviously, if you played the game, you would have caught it, I think. But I absolutely loved this scene, and everything about it was great. First, I loved that they had Henry be a person of interest for the hunters, having that connection to Kathleen in terms of Kathleen wanting to find him because she wants to take revenge. I thought all of that was great. Things that didn't exist in the game, but it really makes the story work. And it makes it such that there's a lot at stake, which I absolutely love. Now, when it comes to the doctor, everything about the exchange between Kathleen and the doctor was great. Like, I loved every aspect of it. From her threatening the doctor, to the language that she was using, to the way she was speaking, I loved all of it. But then, this is where they lost me. Even though I loved the fact that they connected this back to the gang that Joel and Ellie ran into and connected the dots there, which I thought was great, something that made absolutely no sense was how they had Kathleen go back and kill the doctor just like that. I mean, obviously she did it because the other guys were dead, so she's like, I'm not gonna need you anymore, but he's a doctor. She's gonna need a doctor at some point. So to kill the doctor like this was unnecessary. I mean, unless he did something really terrible to her, I don't see this making a lot of sense logically for her to just kill him like that. Unless she's just cuckoo crazy and, she doesn't really have a logical train of thought. You know what I mean? But then the other thing I absolutely loved with the Hunters story is the fact that they showed Kathleen and Perry finding this sinkhole in the building. I thought that this was great. A few great things came out of this scene. One is that this is set up for the introduction or the appearance of the bloaters, who we're going to see in the next episode. I did a separate video on this if you're interested, but also it shows us the dangers of the outside world. It shows us the things that you would have to deal with if you were outside in this universe. So that was great. The third aspect of it is it showed us more how Kathleen was a ruthless psychopath who doesn't care about her own people. She just thinks about revenge, and she only cares about accomplishing her goal, which is to find Henry, because she thinks that he sold them to the Fedra. Everything about this was great because there were a few key things that really came together quite well with this one scene alone, which was very short in itself as well. Now, when it comes to Kathleen and Perry finding the drawings on the wall and everything like that, obviously this is where Sam and Henry were. I thought that this was great. Really, what this was trying to do is tell the audience that there's a kid involved. That's all it was. For video game players, it was probably pointless, and video game fans would probably not have cared if we didn't get this particular scene. But I think it was necessary because obviously they needed to tell us somehow that there's a kid involved. Now, with that said, the impact of seeing Sam at the end would have been better or higher if we didn't see this. But I get why they did it. It could have been shorter though. That's all I would say about that. Now, when it comes to the interaction between Joel and Ellie, talking about the fact that Ellie shot the kid who we saw earlier, and the fact that, it's gonna impact her in some sort of way in the future. I loved all of that. I loved all of the discussions that they had, all of their interactions, their conversation. I thought it was great. It wasn't overdone, but at the same time, they didn't just rush it either. You know what I mean? Like they did it just right. And I love the fact that they had Joel finally giving Ellie the gun and teaching her how to use it and everything like that. I thought that was great. Now, when it comes to Sam and Henry's introduction in this episode, obviously it was different in a game. And to be honest, I loved the game version better. Reason for that is because we got to see a little bit of a fight between Joel and Henry, which we didn't see here. We may still see that, but as a first introduction scene, what we saw in the game was more impactful. However, with that said, I loved the way that they introduced Sam. I thought that it was pretty awesome. It was creepy, and I think that it worked really well as an ending for the episode. But that's pretty much everything I wanted to go through in this video. I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, smash the like button, subscribe to join our community, and press the bell to be notified when I upload on the channel. That's it for this video. See you next time for another super video.